We just finished 2 years of a continuous added measure of iskashros. Kufya takes on average between 7 to 10 minutes a day. And there was a special 2 years in which we were saying Kufya for the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin. But now we moved into Shira Mailis. So I recently came across a very interesting sikha from the Rebbe that I would like to begin with. The Rebbe speaks about the Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah that says, Umahaya Esa, that when Yaakov Avinu was by Lavan, so what was he doing? And the Rebbe brings 2 dayas. There's the day of Rabbi Shua ben Levi, that Haya Esa, Haya Emer Shira Mailis. And then there's Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachman, that he was saying Sefer Tilim. And the Rebbe says that the question is a very strange one. Mahaya Esa. The pasuk says what he was doing. I mean, it's like the Torah is very clear in the descriptions. There's the blistering heat of the sun, and there's the frost of the desert night. So why does the Medrash ask Mahaya Esa? And the Rebbe says that the Pshat Mahaya Esa was not what was he doing. We know what he was doing. The Torah says what he was doing. It's an open pasuk. But the question is, wie hat es durchgemacht? How is it possible that Yaakov Avinu should live by Lavan for such a long time? And he should maintain his spiritual equilibrium. He should know who he is. And the Rebbe said that being in that Golos situation, for sure took a toll. A Ruchnius took a toll on Yaakov also. The Horaya that the Torah says that Yaakov said, Im Lavan Ramehu. So then I could be Achiv Baramos. I can play his game. So we're in Golos, and there's the Golos is Lavan. It's all one big obfuscation after the other, one big deception after the other, and it takes a toll. It takes a toll. It takes a toll. Hecha 1900 year takes a toll, but 30 years from this tkufa, it takes a toll. And Achiv Baramos, we have to use Levushia Mizbarer. And Levushia Mevarer, and whatever. It's a Yodi Inish Benafshe, that it's very, very hard to maintain the same level of inspiration and clarity and enthusiasm when you're dealing with a Lavan v'chuli. So the Rebbe says that's the question. How did he maintain being Yaakov? And the Rebbe says that the opinion of Shmuel ben Nachman is understood because it says that if somebody can't learn Torah, so then he could say Tilim, and Tilim is like Negoyim and Aholis. But Shira Mailis, what's Shira Mailis? What's Meintos? What's the extraordinary or outstanding nature of these Kapitla Tilim that enabled Yaakov to be able to achieve what he had to achieve? And the Rebbe points out that there's something very unusual in the Shira Mailis, and it's the Rebbe's Kapitel this year. We have to learn the Rebbe's Kapitel, and I've learned the Rebbe's Kapitel. A shir is a davar shel simcha. There's interesting notations from the Rebbe and the Haggadah on the union of ein shira el ala yayin. Rebbe's medayik, whether you have to hold the cup during Hallel, the kafe yad like this, or you could be eiches like by a bracha. How does it work? There's an interesting dion, so to speak, a discussion about what exactly it means to have a koch shel yayin. But for sure, it's an inyan shel simcha. And probably most of the people here are familiar with the words that the Rebbe told Mordechai Werdiger, the Chassidish singer, that the Rebbe said to him, is the mashma for Rashi as singen an nigen daf ayid zayin b'simcha. So ayid daf zayin b'simcha. What the Mitzvah says is a gefinzich in Golos, and it takes a toll, and it eats away at us in a very insidious way. And b'miyuchad, the Golos of the last year, that we can't pashat begashmis, we can't get to the oil as often, if at all, and people are physically separated from each other, so the gedel legima is diminished. And it takes a toll. So, Mahaya Eimer, this is the question. And the Rebbe says, he was saying Shir HaMailis, a shir is a nigun, a shir is a initial simcha. And you start to learn the Rebbe's kapitel, and l'cha'ira, the things that are being talked about are not exactly simcha. The notion of the tzarasa, b'tzarasa likarasi, is not an initial simcha. The notion that you're surrounded by sfas sheker and lashon amiyah is not an initial simcha. And the Rebbe says that the hakel hilach achar achitum, that the conclusion of the Rebbe's kapitel this year is ani shalom v'chiadaber heimel ha-milchama. I am for peace. I am at peace with those around me. I seek to create a sense of peace and coexistence, but there's no interest on their behalf. When I speak about it, when I try to, so to speak, create the possibility for peace, heimel ha-milchama, they attack me. So the Rebbe said something incredible. The Rebbe said that Yaakov Avinu never allowed Golus to, so to speak, get to him, because he knew that every Yerida is a Tzedek Aliyah, and that the 21 years that Yaakov Avinu spent by Lavan would bring about an extraordinary kind of positive transformation. So B'meila, even though he was at the present, he was in a golus, a very serious golus, but he didn't focus on the golus. And the Rebbe says that takes us into the next kapitel, which is the Rebbe's kapitel. Esa eine Eloharim, ma'ayin yovi ezi, ameheptuv de'egen. And you look into the future. And we don't allow the present circumstances to overwhelm and inundate us, because we live with a picture of the future. And l'cha'eda, this is, at least in part, what the Rebbe means when he says to go out of our golus pnimi. Instead of to focus on the circumstances and the situation that we are, and the present reality, to know be'emunah shlema, that every Yerida is l'tzedek aliyah. And even if at present the circumstances are nicht bavilikt, they're not ideal, and it's not in any way, shape, or form what we want, that shouldn't get us down. And it shouldn't disable us from an yin of shir, an yin of simcha, an yin of optimism. And the Rebbe speaks in the Sikha about the Alt Vienel de Nisoyen, that a Yid doesn't look for this. And when we say that we find joy in the present circumstances, it's not because we actually enjoy or are happy about it, but rather this is where the Eibishter put us. This is our current reality. But our current reality doesn't have to dictate how we look at the world. The Rebbe wants us to learn about Inyani Gula Moshiach. In yesterday's Parsha, it's very clear that we're not on our own program. Running your own program is not a good idea. And bringing your own keteiros, no matter what kind of positive intentions you have, is not necessarily going to result in a positive reaction. You're not going to engender necessarily the Gilui Ashkin Lamata. And Nadav and Avihu stehen in a mededike madrega. And Moshe says to Aaron, Mekudoshim imenu, it's a mededik, aber nicht das will der Eibishter. And the Rebbe told us exactly what he wants. The Rebbe said, Tut als was kennt, margele bepumme the Chassidim, that I heard from many elder Chassidim. The Rebbe didn't say Tut als was wilt. The Rebbe said Tut als was kennt. And Tut als was kennt means that we should look deeply into the Rebbe's words, and we should apply the Rebbe's words in real time to our lives. And the Rebbe very clearly spelled out that he wants us, that the Derech HaYeshara, which is this week's Pirkei Avos, is Pashat zu sitzen und zu lernen in Yonei Gulu Moshiach, lernen allein und lernen mit der Zweiten. Wir sind Chabad Chassidim von dem Rebbe. And Chassidus Chabad believes that everything comes to the mind through learning. When a Yid learns things, when a Yid's mizbeinin in things, and a Yid distills that into emotion, which ultimately spills into Maisa B'Peil, that is the Tachlis HaKavana. That's what it's about. man darf Pashut sitzen und horven in Inyani Gula Mashiach on a daily basis. And there really is no other option. And there really is Kichein Suvesi. This is the order we got. This is the instructions we got. And we have to go by that in a serious way. We a lot of times we don't get to choose our circumstances. Things happen that are far, far beyond us. And for reasons unbeknownst or not understood by me, I had the schus to speak at the Kinnis Shluchim a few years ago. And let's just say that whatever I did or didn't do in the last 30 years, I'm for sure not the poster child of that I excelled in Yoni Gula Mashiach necessarily more than anybody else. And maybe not, and maybe even less than anybody else. But whatever. I ended up being Nafal B'Gerali, the schus that I should speak at the Kinnis about the Yoni Gula Mashiach. Open up the Kinnis. So I was talking to my Chaver Yossi Lu at the time, and he gave me a very interesting idea. By the way, L'chaim is Abner for Shlema. He said to me, he gave me the kernel of an idea, which I very much I liked, and I ran with it. He said, like, to take people to the Rebbe after Gimel Tammuz was not something that we ever envisioned. And yet, he said, you do it. You bring people to the Rebbe all the time. How do you do it? And this is the opportunity, this is the reality that we have to deal with now. What we have to do. And you figure it out. He said, the Rebbe gave us a job. The Rebbe told us to learn in Yoni Gula Mashiach. And the Rebbe told us to speak about that with others. Figure it out. We have to figure it out. Anyway, that was the theme that I went with. And a few days later, I was coming out of the mikveh, and I met a younger man who I never spoke to before, much younger than me, a younger man in Kronites. And he had heard about whatever, the kinos and whatever I said, and he said to me, so how about you do something? I spoke, I don't remember whose idea it was then, but somebody, gave me the idea that it's 70 days from the Shchedish Kislev to Yud Shvat, that every single day should be an inyan of Yoni Gula Mashiach, a different inyan, and to share with a minyan yidden. So the Shinger man says to me, so how about you start making a video every day, a few minute video? And I can't even tell you why I said yes. It was the craziest thing I ever said. Like I'm a responsibility to take upon myself. As a famous guy once said, to speak for an hour, he said, I need 2 minutes to prepare. To speak for 2 minutes, I need an hour to prepare. And that really, to speak for an hour, I also need 3 hours to prepare, but to speak for 2 minutes is even harder. And to say something meaningful, to actually not stamp to grandstand and hakenchainik, but actually to teach something new and dynamic and fresh. And it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing. And everything pays a price. You focus on one thing, so whatever you take away from something else, it's not possible. You pay a price for whatever you do. And I don't know why I said yes. And it was a busy. It ended up being a much busier season than I envisioned, and it ended up becoming, Baruch Hashem, one of my children got engaged, and I was Pizar Nefesh and back and forth. But really, with keches that came from another place, I did manage. I missed a day, I made it up. I did manage to pull it off. Like I did actually do. And Yomafik Heights gave me serious bikadis. He said, so what's your achlata for your shvat that now you stop learning in Yoni Gula Mashiach? And that's it. And now you're finished. It was a good bikadis, but whatever. The Yetzer Hara is still stronger for the Vaila, and I didn't kind of snap back into it. But what I want to share with everybody is an extraordinary thing that happened during that period. I had an achrayas. I had to present something every single day, and there was no breda. I had to find something, and I had to find, and I had to look, and it took tremendous effort. But the mitzias was, as there really is no choice. And Alter Rebbe says, when you learn with something and you think about something, and then you give it over, that becomes the ingredients of what your reality is made of. And that's the Esa Eine Alaharim. You're not looking at the things before you. You're not focused on the details that can bring you down. You're focused on what the Rebbe wants you to be focused on. And you're focused on Geula, and you're focused on Moshiach. And it's like it works. If the Rebbe says it, then it works, and it's a mitzias. So I want to share like a vignette that I've shared with some people. During that period, at one time, I ended up in a shiva house, as used to happen before COVID, and so we have to say something between mincha ma'ariv. We have to say something. So at a certain point, I used to start. I'll say a mishnah of Pirkei Avos. After a mishnah, people can't relate to a mishnah. Pirkei Avos, that's so to speak doable. You can find something relevant that will speak to people who are not involved in Torah mitzvahs. But I didn't have any time to look at Pirkei Avos. All I had in my head was Yonigul Moshiach. So I started speaking about Yonigul Moshiach. I said, I want to tell you about something that's going to happen very soon. You should all be aware of it. And whatever I had, it was, min haba biyadi, is this is what I was into. This is what I was, and I didn't know how people would react. I really didn't. And this is what I had. This is what I had. So that's what I gave. And the response was extraordinary. It was actually unbelievable. People came over to me. One guy said, that was the most inspirational thing I've heard, he said, in years. This is what I needed to hear. That was so inspirational. Really, that's what's going to happen. And how is this going to happen? And how's that going to happen? And then I found it other places. I would meet people, wherever I would meet somebody, I would share an Inyan and Gula Mashiach with him. And the response was extraordinary. And I remember thinking to myself, what fools we are, what shaitan we are. Like, we have to make our own program. The Rebbe told us what to do. And if only Chassidim just do what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said, koch and Moshiach. The Rebbe said the world is ready to hear it. That's what the world is ready to hear. What the Rebbe said the world's ready to hear. What the Rebbe wants the world to hear. And it can be done. It can be done. And we have to do it. And in Lei Achshav Emasai, we can't, we're 30 years deeper in Golos Achmanul Islam, and Medafsach always shuckling, and we have to get this done. It's just there simply is no real choice. When I was when the Rebbe said that sikh, I was a bacher. I had the privilege of being on Shlichus in Los Angeles, and during that time, I don't remember who discovered it, but one of our Chassidim discovered that if you get an American Express card, you can get a cheap round trip ticket, $200. It was very cheap in those days, round trip, and we were in New York a lot. Baruch Hashem, we managed to get a shus. We were in New York a lot, and during the course of those 2 years, I ended up being I flew 10 times. So, but after 10 times, I was actually eligible for an upgrade. I wasn't at 22. I had never yet sat in a private plane. I certainly didn't sit in first class at the time, and I got an upgrade. It was the last time we're leaving LA. So I'm sitting in first class. Lady says, "Oh, it's 10 times. It's that you get a free upgrade." Okay, fine. It's not bad first class. If it wasn't so expensive, I'd probably get used to it. So anyway, I'm sitting there, and it's at night. I can't put on film with anybody, but I can see clearly the guy next to me is Jewish. So I start to speak to him. I start to have a conversation with him. Was ist gekocht in the Jahren? We gepasht Nemuna. We gekocht no Moshiach. Everything was we spoke of Moshiach a whole day. That's all we thought about. That's all we spoke about. And it was just without thinking. That's what I started to speak about. And at some point, I remember during the conversation, I think this guy must think I'm totally Meshuggah. It's all signs. Meshuggah. Like, who cares? Bald kommt Moshiach. Wird sein. Also we gar nicht Meshuggah. And about like a half hour into this conversation, so the stewardess comes around, and she says, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We don't have a special kosher meal ordered for you." So I realized that, first class you get a special kosher meal. I'm supposed to play along and say, "I'm just happy to be here. I don't need to eat anything." Like, you don't have my meal? Wow. So I said, "Can I get at least a regular meal?" "Well, we don't serve meals like that in first class." I said, "You want me to be hungry? Like, I don't think that would be fair." "Well, let me speak to the other stewardess." Anyway, she comes back. She says, "Okay, we decided that it's our fault, and we'll serve you the regular meal, even though we really don't do that in first class." And this guy is sitting next to me, like a very secular Jew, like he was really far out. He's just sitting. They're bringing me my kosher meal, and I'm like, taking the plastic off. And he calls over the stewardess, and he says, "Would you happen to have another kosher meal?" And she says to him, "Did you order one?" He says, "No, but I would appreciate I forgot to." He says, "I would appreciate getting a kosher meal." See, this guy has a kosher meal. So she says, I don't know. I don't know if we have, we made one exception and now I don't know if we have another. Anyway, she comes back 5 minutes later. She says, sir, it's amazing. There's one extra kosher meal on this flight. And we said, if the guy next to you is having a kosher meal, you can have a kosher meal too. So they bring him his kosher meal, and everybody else around us is eating his caviar and steak. And it's like, this is first class, not from today, first class from 30 years ago. He used to really be nice. So I say to this guy, I said, I didn't know you eat kosher. He says, I don't. I don't. He says, I said, why are you don't have to impress me. Like, why are you eating this? He says, look here, Mendel. He says, you talk to me about this Moshiach thing, and I'm starting to think, like, what if Moshiach actually does come, and I just had a non-kosher meal. He says, I think I bet eat kosher, I bet eat kosher. And it was like, again, like a light bulb moment where here, I was just a yeshiva bacher, like this, we were in the midst of the turmoil and the angst of an El Tafshin and Gimel. Everybody remembers what that was like. And it was like a pasha zich with emunah. There was nothing else. We just lived, the current circumstances were so painful and so difficult. Just live with Mashiach, but the reality was that as a gehert ayid, gehert wegen Mashiach, and it had a pull on him. Beide Brüder, man darf reden wegen Mashiach, man darf sich kochen in Mashiach, man darf leben mit Mashiach. So that's what the Rebbe wanted, and there simply is no other option. Seine Chassidim meint, weil man darf sagen, a Chassid von Wemmen, a Chassid von dem Rebbe. Ton was the Rebbe will. It's not about Ketera Zara. It's not about our own intuition. It's not about our own ideas. It's about us, sich übergeben. Ton was the Rebbe will, the Mesida und the Sinner, and it's a sichere Sach that if we will simply all follow orders and do what the Rebbe told us to do with Mesiras Nefesh, beyond the call of duty, which is the call of duty, that the Eibishter wird helfen, as Gott in Gichen, weil mir sicher sein, sehen sich mit unser Rebbe und werden das heimnehmen, Beis Hamikdash HaShlishi, im Heira, ubi Amenu, Amen. L'chaim, Brüder, l'chaim.